So, like, Dungeons and Dragons is really an improv exercise for creatives. You know, when I was young, I played a lot of video games. I still do, but I was always fascinated with like RPGs, and specifically like Final Fantasy. And I think that's kind of a gateway drug in a way, because it gets you to read and enjoy a good story, and be interactive and play, and you have like attack and magic, and so it sort of follows a role-playing format, which is oddly what Final Fantasy is actually based off of. It's based off of the original Dungeons and Dragons. People don't really know that, but from there, I had a good friend who played the third edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and I was continually trying to convince him, can we play? Can we play? Can we play? Because it seems like something I would enjoy. Having kind of an actor's background and writer's background, I was like, all right, I kind of need to keep bugging you. Eventually, he caved, and he ran a game that we played for a couple months. And I played it with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and we enjoyed it a lot. Prior to that, I had actually played one session of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was second edition. And it was with some guys from college that I barely knew. And literally, I come in there, and the first thing they do is they stab me in the back, and my character dies. And I was like, wait, hold on. This is fun? But after I played with my friend with third edition, I started to really kind of get into it, and I bought a player's handbook for 3.5 at the time, and I later transitioned into Pathfinder, and that's actually where I started running Dungeons and Dragons, is through Pathfinder, because Pathfinder was coming out with new books. They were current, like whereas 3.5 had retired and fourth edition was playing. Subsequently, I then played a little bit of first edition just to sample it, and I watched people play fourth edition, and I fell in love with fifth edition because it's so simple, and I think from there that's where my true passion for the game evolved, was in the fifth edition of Dungeons and Dragons. But I played other role-playing games subsequently, but fifth is the tops for me. Yeah. Vicious Mockery evolved from a conversation that Jesus, the director, producer, editor, he wears multiple hats. A conversation that him and I had when he first entered the Comic Bug in Manhattan Beach, where I had started running Dungeons and Dragons. He came in within the first few months of our initial sort of opening, and I was trying to figure out what to do with the whole running aspect at a comic book store. It was still kind of in its infancy, and I was trying to figure it out. And he comes in, has the books, has everything, and he goes, this would be really fun to watch, or like a really good story to do live on TV or whatever. I agreed, and I told him I would love to do something like that. It's just, And he kind of introduced this idea really early on. We played a lot subsequently, and we had a lot of fun. And ultimately, I realized he was friends with another one of my friends who I had known, who I was working with like prior to that point, and Andrew, which you all know as Drew on the show. And Drew had originally came up to me, like even before Jesus did, and he was like, "Man, we should do like a Dungeons and Dragons show," and he was so enthusiastic about it. But I was like, well, we don't really have the means, right? Jesus had the means. Jesus came up to me and he was like, "I can get us into PadNet, which is Long Beach's local access station, actually where we're filming this today." And he said, "We have a time slot. I can edit the show. Do you have an idea?" And I said, "Sure." Then we held auditions to bring in some talent, and I invited my friends from the comic book store, and we tried to see who would fit, both in who had the time commitment, availability, who had the creativity we were looking for, the energy we were looking for, the likability, and Vicious Mockery just evolved from there. And I really love it a lot. So Vicious Mockery conceptually evolved from my observations of, believe it or not, our government system. And I just was like critiquing certain aspects and a little upset at other things. And I also my social critiques of society. D&D is sort of a gateway to inclusiveness, and the way the books are currently written, they reflect that. In 3.5, the books didn't use the word he. It always used the word she, because they realized that there was a gender normative with Dungeons and Dragons, that, it was normal to be male. And they were like, no, we want female players to feel comfortable with this game. So we're not going to use the he pronoun. We're going to start with she. And with that same kind of energy, I pulled that into Vicious Mockery. So I have a lot of racial issues. I don't have much gender issues, but I do have sexual orientation issues in there, because I in my life, I have a lot of colleagues and friends and associates that experience these issues on a daily basis. So I wanted to make sure I got that into the game. But I feel like those issues are a part of a grander kind of scheme that deals with issues with like capitalism and just the general aspects of capitalism and sort of our governmental structures. So I'm not like anarchy in the UK, anarchy in the USA, but that's not me. But I kind of view Vicious Mockery as sort of a critique at traditional capitalism. Yeah, I know it. I know it's, they're called the Pickle Posse. It's like, how is this a critique of capitalism? But that's kind of how it started. I feel like you really can't have a serious story with serious themes in Dungeons and Dragons without it being too grimdark. You really have to throw in some joy and some happiness, and you have to see flares of humanity flourishing. So I like to take little examples from my everyday life and little examples of like what somebody likes to do in their free time that's funny or cute or whatever, and I like to throw that into the game when I can, and as little winks to my friends and my colleagues. So Vicious Mockery is sort of a hodgepodge of my joy, my critiques, and my hopes for the future in our world, in our real world. So Mike Buckley is my co-writer, and I throw ideas at Mike Buckley, and he helps me cook them. So sometimes I will have a really, really great idea, and I'll kind of bounce them off Jesus, our producer and director, and he's a really talented kind of creative too, but he does a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I don't like to occupy his time because I know that while he's very, very talented, I want to give him the space to just sort of be an audience member and just edit and direct and do that job. Whereas Mike, he's an actual science fiction writer. He writes for a living, and he teaches English courses at colleges and high schools. And I sort of bounce ideas off of him, and he gives me a lot of great data to work with. He writes very, very little for me now. I write a lot of what goes on, but I will throw it at him. I'll throw what I write at him, and he goes, oh, okay, maybe this person should actually have a name. Maybe you want to do this. Maybe you want to give the characters a motivation through someone that they've already met. It's been pretty great having somebody who sort of helps me edit. It's a little. I'm not going to say it's uncommon, because there are people who call up their friends from another state and say, hey, or whatever. They call up their friends who aren't playing in that direct game, and they go, hey, would you think it would be cool if? And they throw that idea at them, and that's kind of what I do with Mike. It's not super hyper formal, classroom setting or whatever. It's literally him and I getting beers, and we go, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if? And him and I have worked out sort of a plot line that goes all the way to at least 100 episodes. So the main world of Vicious Mockery all revolves around one of the largest kingdoms in my world. It's called Sectus. The kingdom is called the Kingdom of Sectus, and the country is called Sectus, because it's kind of split into 4 sectors, if you will. But there's 5 major guilds, sorry. And the guilds sort of dictate all the happenings in the world. So when one country is trading whatever it may be, textiles or whatever they need, they're going through a guild, because the guild is offering protection, they're offering boats, safe harbor. They won't even allow you to sell on guild territory if you are not guild sanctioned. So you have the foxes, which kind of own the banks, and they sort of have a lot of spying kind of going on. And they have the ear of the kingdoms. So when you have the money, you have the ear. You have the helm, which kind of do major construction. And then they also have a standing army that they loan to each of the kingdoms. So if the principality of the kingdom decides they want to go to war, they have to check with the helm. Do they want to? Does the helm want to fight the helm in another kingdom? So they sort of regulate war. You have the green, which is like the farmers' guild, but they are all the major agriculture. They also change the way because they have druids, they can change the way rivers flow, and they can change the topography of the land with a couple days' time. They can change miles and miles of land at their own whim. So if you want more acorns, well, you know what? We got to change this swampland to something more viable. They can do that, and sometimes they'll do the opposite. You have the Mages Guild, And so they dictate kind of all of the major arcane innovations, research, education. Major education happens through the Mages Guild. So even if you decide, oh man, I'm not arcane, I'm not magically inclined, but I want to learn more about history, you got to go through the Mages Guild. They dictate that. And then you have the Wheel, which are sort of the religious guild. And they don't like to be called a guild, but all the major religions kind of are all built into the Wheel. They also have their own standing army, and they're called the Paladins Alliance. And the Paladins are sort of the police force in all of the different areas. So you have a holy police force dictating laws. And let's say you get found that, you didn't do something right. Well, you're going to go to a group of guild leaders to get judged and sentenced. It's not through the king or queen. So the fun major aspects of my world of Dia is that the kingdoms themselves truly have no power. And I think our friends now know that. So we have 4 main characters in Vicious Mockery. We have Aote, who is the tiefling bard, and she is awesome. Comes to the group, contributes to the group through her membership in one of our guilds, and they're sort of mercantile guilds in a way. And she is a part of the guild that owns the banks, and essentially they own information too, knowledge. So they have spies in different parts of the world, and I can feed her little points of data that maybe other people don't know, because she does know this. But we're at the point we are in the story currently, she doesn't know very much. And then we have Delron, who is our human monk, coming from a monastery which is to the east of Sectus. And he was sort of pushed off there from the orphanages in Sectus. Sectus is the main kingdom where our friends meet and thrive throughout like the first 2 chapters of Vicious Mockery. And he does well in the monastery as far as combat training goes, but his discipline is lacking. So when he joins the Pickle Posse, which is the group Vicious Mockery kind of, it's their moniker that they took on, their team name, if you will. He is sort of early kicked out, just recently kicked out of the monastery due to violent tendencies. And he sort of gets kind of swept up into this world of politics and guilds. We have my friend Drew, who plays Audrin, the faithless or the hapless, who's a paladin, not by choice, sort of thrusted into it. He comes from a town called Grimwater, which our friends might know it because those episodes are coming out now. And Grimwater is a nice, horrible town to the south, very muggy and horrible, whereas he sort of lived a life of attempted leisure. Didn't quite work out that way when he was tasked to save the life of someone and couldn't, and subsequently saved his own. It was a total accident, so he sort of carries this guilt with him, and he ends up in Sectus due to just kind of being lost in the world and a little depressed. Andrew does a very good job of sort of doing the sad sack, the sad clown, Because he's a really funny guy, but his backstory is kind of sad. And as our audience will see, he's not well received in Grimwater. And then finally, I have Althea, who Jordan plays, and Althea is a Eladrin sorceress. She's an elven sorceress. Eladrin's sort of an offshoot of elf. And she comes from the Elven Kingdoms, which we haven't seen in the show yet, but the Elven Kingdoms are modeled after Aztecan and Mayan technologies, and they have a giant pyramid that sort of everybody lives on. And it's in the middle of the desert. And you're like, okay, fair-skinned elves, how are they making it possible? Magic. And so she comes from a heavily magic-infused area. And she kind of lived with her parents are owners of a textile sort of shipping company. And she kind of got fed up with some aspects of elven culture, being a little different than regular elves, getting along more with the elves that live on sort of the lower tiers of the pyramid, if you will. She was like, you know what? I'm going to go and discover what's inside of me, because I don't understand this arcane stuff that's flowing in my veins. She ends up in the sort of country of Sectus, not in the kingdom, but in the country, and happens across a witch who tells her, hey, I can show you what's inside you. And she doesn't realize that the witch is kind of coaxing her to complete the tasks that she never had an opportunity to complete. And so Althea is thrusted into the world with goals from someone else, with her own as well. She has some issues with family. But ultimately, our friends meet together by happenstance in a bar, and there's a bar fight. It is a fight club, if you will, and so there's gambling and stuff like that. And from there, they show some offensive prowess, which one of our guild, high-ranking guild members take notice of, give them a task, which turns into something that's a little more political than they realized. And now they are sort of refugees of, or not refugees, that is not the term I want to use. They're more like political terrorists right now. And I think they don't like me for that. I think they don't like me. I think my players don't like me for turning this into like a political terrorism thing where they're the heroes. I believe that the players work really well together because they attempt to be friends outside of the show. It's really, really helpful to when you bond with someone to be able to experience a story together, right? The best way to bring players to the table is when they have a relationship with each other, even sometimes if it's tumultuous, because now it's an opportunity for you to work those troubles out. I think that a lot of them actually didn't know each other too well. They knew of each other, they've seen each other in the past, but we spent a good amount of time kind of bonding, and we're still doing little bonding activities here and there. They speak similar languages due to Dungeons and Dragons. Just even being interested in D&D kind of gets your brain in that fantasy realm, and you start taking in that data that is the fantasy world data, whether it be through like Japanese RPGs or through reading old school Salvatore books, or whether it just be playing Dungeons and Dragons. There's a schema that you learn. There's a language that you learn, and everyone sort of gets on board with it. And I know Andrew and Paola knew each other really well. I knew that Jordan and Paola were friends from the Sketchy Bugs, so I knew that they would work really well. And I basically knew I knew everybody from the Comic Bug in Manhattan Beach, and it sort of just kind of blended together because they sort of all sort of knew each other. Yeah. My favorite part of the adventure, well, it's usually the one thing that you're working on right now. But my current favorite thing that I did was the wagon chase scene. I know it just happened, a little while ago, but the wagon chase scene, I actually had to build wagon rules to get like it going well. And what I did was I went online and I looked at some of the rules that other people have subsequently made, and I sort of blended it in with sort of my ideas too. Created a hodgepodge of that, and because I had two wagons and two different groups of people who were like, okay, we have to protect the wagon, ourselves, someone else, and defeat the wagon that's chasing us. I think having multiple multiple directions of craziness, I think it really worked out real well for them, because they at the end they really felt triumphant when they defeated the captain of that of the search party that was coming after them. I really think that they earned that victory. But with every victory comes loss. And I actually had the opportunity to do something really, really sad in the second part of the wagon chase. And I know some of my audience is like, oh, man. Like, when they watch that episode, it's a hard episode. It was hard for me. And I know it was hard for my players and my actors. But for every couple laughs, for every couple gasps, you have to have a tear in there. I really think it fleshes out what Dungeons and Dragons actually is made for, is the true gamut of human emotion. If you're playing D&D just to hit on attractive other races, like, oh, I want to hit on attractive elven men or whatever, I think you're sort of missing the point. It's fun with friends, and it's fun to kind of go through that every once in a while. But being able to go through that whole gamut of human emotion, that's what a good episode is. And I think the wagon chase scene hit every point I think is that D&D needs to hit. So we have a sound person who also helps us out with like a lot of music. We have a camera person. We have Jesus, which is our producer. We have hands that kind of help us out too. We can usually run with a main crew of 3 people, and that's not including the actors, but 3 main people in the back room. And we have one hand who will occasionally come and hang out with us in the studio here, and or help with the back room. So we run about 3 or 4 in the back room there, and they really do amazing work. I don't think people realize the amount of effort, love, and care that goes into every episode of Vicious Mockery. The music is custom made. Either that or we ask for the rights to use it. The intro song was played by my buddy David Alatorre. And it's actually a derivative of a rock band that I was actually the lead singer of, and it's a derivative of a song that we wrote together, and we used it as the opening and closing sequence for Vicious Mockery. It's lovingly called the Pirate Theme, but I believe we're going to change the name to Vicious Mockery. But the crew's amazing, man. They make music for us. We have like 4 cameras. I don't know if anybody realizes that we have 4 main cameras. One that's just on me, one that's on 2 of the actors, one that's on the other 2, and then we have one overhead camera that can see the grid map, and they're switching to each of these cameras live as we're moving around. So they're paying attention to what's happening on each camera and with the facial expressions that each person is having. When one person seems like they're going to speak, they switch over to them. They have a talent, an innate talent to identify what our show is going to do before we do it, because it's not scripted. It's completely unscripted. It's all improv. It's all what our characters kind of want to do. I have kind of a script, but I sort of break my script very frequently. And they're very, very good. They have a keen eye to be able to switch around just without much effort. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. They are absolutely talented. I thank them every day for their awesome work for the show. Dungeons and Dragons is really an improv exercise for creatives. Drew, I'll explain it. Andrew and I actually know each other from a kind of an acting job, and where improv was really emphasized. And improvisational kind of work, it's hard to study. It's hard to be good at it, because, well, following a script is easy, and being able to, I don't want to say it's really easy, but it's easy in the sense of, like, you can play with the script, right? You can practice the script and figure out a way to be good at what you're saying. And so if you have a line like, "Oh man, I really need to go home," and your character's sad, "Oh man, I really need to go home," and then you could practice that again, "Oh man, I really need to go home," and you can see where that sadness is. With improv, you get one take. You get that moment to truly experience the depth and the importance of whatever that is. "Oh man, I really got to go home." Like, now it just is, right? And whatever I said in that moment is a truth. It just is. So if I say, "Oh, I have a bell in my hand," I have a bell in my hand, period. That is Dungeons and Dragons. Now, the Dungeon Master might say, "Well, where'd you get that bell?" Right? Because the Dungeon Master probably looked at their character sheet and was like, "Oh, they don't really have a bell. Like, why do they have a bell?" But a good Dungeon Master will work with the player, right? Because in improv, there's an exercise called yes and. And it's an exercise in never denying another actor's desire. So if you say, "I have a bell in my hand," I'll go, "Yes, and." The bell rings in a very low tone, right? Now that's established. Unless we do something with the story, that bell will always have a low tone. You will always have a bell until you get rid of it or toss it away. So that's what Vicious Mockery was really built off of, the idea of yes and. So we use a lot of improvisational work. It literally is an evolving, ever-changing event. The characters are always amazing me because they come up with great ideas, and They're so very talented, finding ways to break my story into tiny little pieces that break my heart because it's like, oh, you completely glossed over an important aspect of my story. But I know the audience didn't, and that's important too. So my audience, they're pretty fun. They're pretty great people. And they actually are really good at improv as well. Some of the funny stuff that they tell us in person or write. I absolutely have become a better person because of role-playing games. I've learned how to listen, to be able to understand what's being asked of me. Sometimes listening is not having the right response to a question. It's about not. But being okay with it. Dungeons and Dragons taught me that. It taught me you don't have to be awesome at everything you do. But if you have good people around you, if you surround yourself with good, awesome people, there is no task that is not insurmountable. And I realize that that's a very grandiose statement. But Dungeons and Dragons is about the grandiose. But not one person can conquer the grandiose. It's a group. It's a team. It's people who trust and love in each other and are willing to take a step back, listen, and let live. Sometimes I have to tell my friends, hey, I'm not good at this, but I know you are. And they won't even know their character as well as, and I'll be like, yeah, I mean, you're way better than me. And really? Yeah. So I'm listening. I'm allowing them to grow and love and thrive and participate in the world. Sometimes we play Dungeons and Dragons or different role-playing games because we have an inability to communicate and be in the world. And it's sort of a test or an experiment on really being present and in the moment and evolving, right? When you pick a character for Dungeons and Dragons, you're not picking a character that's idyllic. That people have this idea that, oh, I'm picking a paladin because it's idyllic, it's awesome, it's powerful. No, it's you. You're picking it because you are a reflection of that. That is a reflection of you. You're only a reflection of what you're playing. Period. If I pick a barbarian to play, somebody who's shirtless and ironclad, or non-ironclad, he's shirtless and fearless, 2 hand axes, there's a part of me that's like that. That's Conan, that's Tarzan, that's a wildling from, Game of Thrones. There's a part of me that's in there that feels that. I harmonize with them. Or else I wouldn't have played it. I would have played something else, like a fighter or something. But you embody what you're playing. It's a part of you. And it allows you to experiment, love, and grow. D&D is like that. D&D is an experience that allows you to really get into the human experience and grow through it. I maybe I'm pushing too much into D&D. Maybe I'm over inserting too much. But I think our audience gets it because they don't come back every week. If they don't, they're growing too. I have really good friends that play with me, and they are very talented people. But being able to play with someone that you love and care for and that you wake up next to every single day, that is a blessing. A lot of people say, oh, my spouse or my significant other doesn't really like this game. But my wife married me on that pure aspect, that Dungeons and Dragons sort of helped our relationship evolve. It changed our speaking, the way we speak to each other, the way we respect each other. And I think it's a good marriage exercise. Having her next to my side as I create and share with you all, that is probably my favorite thing. I have a lot of favorite things, but she always has my back, and she's always pushing me forward, and she'll critique me too, and make me better. And as long as I just don't get mad at her for critiques, I just keep improving. And I hope our audience can see that it doesn't pull down the story to oh, you have a girl in the story, or you have your wife in the story. It's like, no, it doesn't really pull it down. I'm not easier on her or anything like that. I created this story to be tough on everyone, because the world's not easy. But having people you love around you, friends, family, loved ones, significant others, makes things a little easier. And that's what Vicious Mockery brings to the world. I hope our love sort of bleeds through the videos. Well, you should like and subscribe Vicious Mockery if you enjoy good, fun personalities, if you want an ever-evolving story, if you want a story that takes place in a high fantasy realm with a modern take on our issues as a society. You should watch every video, and then you're going to want to go back and rewatch some, because there is so much data impacting some of the subtleties and the nuances. You're not going to pick it all up on the first go. And because I, as the writer, I have to rewatch some of my episodes, because I can't always see all their facial expressions. So I know you as an audience, I'm an audience member too. We're going to watch it together, and it's going to be an awesome, evolving story that even the audience can participate with. Feel free to subscribe, comment. Tell us what you want to see. Tell us what you liked. And we will make sure that we evolve and change for the better. So expect much more fun stuff from Vicious Mockery in the near future. We're going to be going to deserted islands. We're going to be going to new, awesome, tropical venues. There's going to be sea life battles. There's going to be journeys of survival that our friends might not make it through. And all of these things are in my noggin, and I hope to share it with you.